Domo Domo, what is up everybody? Welcome back for this week's JUJUTSU Kaisen Manga Lounge. Hope you got something to drink ready because things are getting hot in the chapter. A lot of flames and fire and hell breaking loose. So we've got chapter 115 part 33, Shibuya Incident part 33. And remember we left off the last chapter with Kusakabe and Panda kind of finally being revealed, and then they run into Geto's family, the blonde girl, as well as the guy with the bandages, who don't know names yet. But then all hell breaks loose, boom, and then we finally, the fight between Jogo and Sukuna commences, and looks like we're, we get that in chapter 115 here, the continuation of that. So, yeah, let's get right into the chapter. As always, thank you very much if you choose to spread that positive juju with like, comment, all that good stuff. And if you know people, if you have friends, family, a grandma, a dog, anyone that likes JUJUTSU Kaisen, thank you very much for considering a share with them as well. But yeah, let's get right into it. Chapter 115, Shibuya Incident Part 33. Here we go. So, yeah, the last page of chapter 114, remember we kind of had Jogo being flung out of the building, and Sukuna kind of on a piece of stone, almost like he's levitating, but he's kind of bouncing off of that, yelling at Jogo, saying, "Is that all you got?" And that's exactly where we start off with chapter 115 here, and got to give it up to Jogo. He's sort of keeping up. Obviously, Sukuna's not going all out, right? We definitely know that, but Jogo's certainly kind of holding his own here a little bit. And then, but this whole the kind of the slashing thing that Sukuna, we're still kind of unclear, as later evidenced in the chapter. And I've mentioned this before too, we were almost kind of led to believe that Sukuna, maybe his curse technique has something to do with slashing and things like that, but I sort of came to the conclusion somewhere along the line as well. I think it's just the way that he's manipulating cursed energy in a way where he's able to just use it so refined that he's able to use it as kind of a slash ability. Because remember, we know that Sukuna, there's been strong evidence that he is kind of heavily poison based, which is why Itadori has this kind of immunity to poison and stuff now as well, right? But yeah, Jogo certainly getting his ass handed to him here. And I love this. It's almost a very kind of Shonen Jump-esque, right? Going through buildings and things like that. We haven't really seen as much of that in JUJUTSU Kaisen too much. We saw a little bit with Nanami versus Mahito when Nanami uses collapse, and Gojo, shoots Toji, when they're fighting in the flashback and all that, and just kind of the grandioseness of that. But man, this is a different level. And Sukuna, I love this little line here. The moonlight's illumination makes it easier to see how pathetic you are. Oh, jeez. That's rough. And Jogo is just, oh man, he is an absolute mess. But, right, so the special grade curses, and remember, cursed spirits do have this kind of ability to really manipulate their cursed energy in a way where they're able to heal themselves up, and more so with cursed spirits, it's almost like second nature to them. And I like this little kind of flashback. I believe it was chapter 11, 10 or 11 maybe, where, the cafe scene, the infamous cafe scene where Geto, who is fake Geto, we didn't know at the time, was talking to Jogo, and Hanami and Dagon were there. He asked fake Geto, how strong am I in terms of Sukuna fingers? And Geto was like, to be honest, maybe 8 or 9, being generous. So this is what Jogo kind of means here on page 5, panel 3, saying like, I knew he was stronger, but I didn't think that it was this much of a difference. Remember, this is 15 fingers Sukuna right now. Super Saiyan 15 finger. But Yeah, and we're not really too sure how it's, nor do I think there's some sort of like specific number. It's not like Dragon Ball power levels. So it's kind of difficult to kind of gauge what the scaling is, so to speak, in terms of the fingers. But Jogo's still hanging in there. And we move through page 6. Sukuna's still kind of joshing him a little bit. And then page 7, we see Jogo. It looks like he's almost kind of taking the building that's now on fire. He's kind of manipulating it in a way where he's like bending the fire almost, into this giant meteor maximum. So this is, in Japanese, it was called Goku no Ban, which is basically the idea that this is like an ultimate move, maximum output or something like that. And it's called Meteor, and this big, oh god, it's, I love this because Kusakabe and Panda are looking on just like, we need to get out of here. This is not our fight. It just goes to show you the difference in level, right? Even someone like Kusakabe is just scared out of his pants. Regardless of whether Sukuna was there, even just Jogo, he probably recognizes that he would be no match against him. And then these two little goons of Geto's family come out here, and then I like the blonde chick. She's like, "What are you guys doing? Don't you see what's going on? We don't have time for that right now." But before the goons can act, we see Kusakabe use a new shadow style Bato sword drawing. Now this is the same one that Kasumi tried to use against Yuji. It's certainly clear that Kusakabe sensei has a lot more of a mastery over this new shadow style. Which also suggests that he's able to use simple domain as well, right? And maybe something that we haven't even seen before as well. Like in the last chapter, he used Evening Moon sword drawing, and we didn't see what goes on, but it was clearly he was getting ready to do something. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what the difference between Evening Sword and Bato sword drawing is, anyways. But yeah, then I like how we move on to page 10 here, always with the humor. Kusakabe sensei and Panda are just like the best combo right now. But Kusakabe sensei, he's clearly like, he's the rational guy, like he's kind of a bum, but he's very rational at least, right? And I like that. It's kind of refreshing, his humor is refreshing, but I also kind of like his practicality too. Sometimes a lot of the characters are just really in over their heads and stuff, so I like how practical he is. Kind of gives a sense of like realism to the story, kind of keeps it grounded. But he's saying like, I don't know what the hell happened, but those are two special grades up there fighting, and we're not supposed to be here. And Panda's kind of in the back like, hurry up, we have to get out of here. I love this analogy. He says, think of them as elephants tap dancing on ants. And to be clear, we are the ants. It's so funny. I was laughing when I was translating that. He's like, so hurry up and run away. And then he gets cut off. Boom! Sukuna is just there. And then I love the faces here on page 11. It's you kind of laugh, but you're also kind of like, oh crap, it's that kind of juxtaposition is interesting as well. But then Sukuna starts, he's clearly on a different level. He's playing games with these people, they're nothing to him. To all humans in the vicinity, until I say otherwise, you're forbidden from moving. If you break this rule, I will kill you. And a little interesting thing that I want to point out here on page 11 is, we see the second eye right here. And we can almost assume at least, we can't confirm, but we can assume maybe Yuji is there. So Yuji might be seeing this stuff going on. Remember, last we saw him, he was unconscious, so maybe he still is unconscious and really not able to fight back at all. But this panel almost makes it look as though Yuji's kind of like groggy, but he's kind of seeing what's going on, but he doesn't have the power to kind of fight back quite yet. Because as it stands right now, Sukuna doesn't have complete control of the body, right? He has 15 fingers, but remember what Geto was saying is that like it still doesn't mean that Sukuna has complete control over the body. But then page 12, it's everyone has to do what Sukuna says. It's this sick, sadistic game. You know, you see this big ass meteor coming down, and you know, Kusakabe sensei and Panda are at least on ground level. The other two up there are even closer, you know. And Sukuna, just hold on, not quite yet. Go! And then, you know, and then everyone, you see Panda and Kusakabe sensei, and we're not really sure what. I mean, hopefully, the blonde lady and the bandage guy are okay. I mean, I don't know why I say hopefully. I mean, it's just because I want to see more of them. But then we get this crazy spread here on 14-15. And you know, you're kind of reading this, like, even when I first read this, I was like, oh crap, the meteor hit all these buildings and this and that. But you have to really kind of, I had to remind myself, like, this is a big deal, you know, like the Jujutsu sorcerers go through tremendous efforts to make sure that there's no like kind of collateral damage, or they like kind of cover up incidents and things like that. But this is something that you can't just cover up, so it's kind of really going to bring into a lot of question about what the kind of the social ramifications and things are going to be as well. You know, it's a big event now, you know, not only in Japan, but it could start kind of making news worldwide. You have a big hub of Japan just getting blown to bits here, so yeah. I'll be interesting, and you know, knowing kind of Akutami Sensei's kind of attention to detail, I'm sure they'll address that, and I'm kind of curious to see what happens with that later on. But yeah, then Jogo here, you know, he's like on page 16. I mean, even if it's Sukuna, he's got to take at least a little bit of damage from that, and Sukuna's like, well, I mean, if you hit me, maybe. And Jogo's just, God, floored, you know. And then Sukuna asks that interesting question, you know, he says, why don't you use your domain? He says, well, Jogo says, I know I'd lose in a battle of domains. And then Sukuna's very quick, saying, is it because that's what happened with Satoru Gojo? You know, so this is also kind of a reminder that Sukuna is always watching as well, right? Whenever we see Itadori, we always have to kind of keep in the back of our heads the fact that Sukuna is always watching. And I think that's kind of an interesting point, you know. So Sukuna knows a lot about what's going on. He knows about anytime Itadori is talking to someone, whether it be insider info and this and that, Sukuna knows all of that. So I think that's going to be kind of an interesting point, and I'm sure the story will kind of touch on that a little bit more too, and Sukuna is certainly going to exploit that knowledge, right? Saying spoken like a true loser. Ugh, he's so rude. But then Sukuna is saying, well, how about I fight using your specialty? And this, of course, is kind of a big question mark in this chapter. On page 17, this bottom panel here, in the Japanese, it was just kind of blocked out as though he says something that, as the reader, we're not supposed to know quite yet. And Joe, you know, it, like purposefully deleting it, almost kind of like a censorship kind of thing. Like, oh, sorry, reader, you can't know what he said just quite yet. But then he uses the kanji for something called kai, which is open. But then the furigana at the time he says something different there called fuga, and we're not too sure what that's supposed to mean either. But it's certainly implying some sort of kind of fire mechanic, right? Even Jogo is surprised, though. He's like, whoa, you're able to use a fire technique? And this and again, as the reader on this page, we're not really supposed to understand what's going on. You're supposed to be left confused. So anyone who's out there kind of like, I don't understand what happened on these pages, like, you're not supposed to. It's supposed to be very kind of mysterious what's going on. Sukuna kind of comments saying, oh, that's right, I thought you'd know about this since you're a fire user, but I guess a cursed spirit wouldn't. Which obviously means a lot more than just a few words there. It's almost implying, remember, because Sukuna, if you're really getting technical, is a curse. But Jogo and Hanami and them are cursed spirits. They're a manifestation of sort of a kind of negative emotions directed at something, right? Mahito is the kind of negative emotions of human beings as a whole. Jogo is kind of earth, the negative emotions given towards earth, whether it be like maybe earthquakes or volcanoes and things like that. Hanami is of like the woods. Dagon is obviously of the ocean, kind of fear of the ocean and things like that. But like things like people like Sukuna or curses, though they're just curses. There seems to definitely be kind of this distinction between cursed spirits and curses, but it's hasn't been really explicitly explained by Akutami Sensei, but this page certainly suggests that there is this kind of supposed to be this difference. And again, I'm just a translator, so I mean, I'm trying to analyze this the best I can as well. But of course, I mean, we're supposed to have all these questions as we're reading it, right? And it's supposed to kind of keep us engaged. So we don't have all the answers, and that's how it's supposed to be for now. And then, of course, this last page here, page 19, Jogo kind of commenting, saying, isn't Sukuna's curse technique slicing and slashing? As readers, we've asked that question as well. We saw him use it against the insect, in the early chapters, when he first used Malevolent Shrine. We saw him use it against Nanako, where he just diced her up. Pretty gruesome, but we're almost kind of led to believe that that's kind of has something to do with curse technique, and maybe it still is, but Sukuna kind of is like, no, that's not my curse technique, dude. I wouldn't be so like petty as to use my curse technique here, because it wouldn't even be a challenge if I did, which is kind of scary to think, right? But again, I think it is some sort of kind of poison based one, if we're kind of supposed to take the evidence as what we've seen it so far. But then, yeah, he says, get ready, let's have a battle of firepower, right? So it's very, very cool chapter. There's a lot more packed in this chapter than at first glance, if I'm honest. I translated it, but then kind of like going over it a couple times, I was like, wow, there's actually a lot more kind of meat on the bones in this chapter than kind of at first glance. But that was chapter 115. Man, things are getting absolutely hot in this in this series. So, but yeah, thank you again if you did enjoy, for spreading that positive juju. Thank you very much for supporting, and we will see you next week. So cheers to you. You know how we do. Mata yoroshiku.